creation expanded with the evolution of mammals. Oceanographers state ocean crust is everywhere younger than 200 million years. Now, mountains uplifted from the Appalachians, the Appalachians would be about here, all the way up to Nova Scotia, and then all the way down to the Carolinas. Deep trenches formed as volcanic sediments raised almost all current day dry lands above sea level. So in other words, when mammals evolved, the land rose above sea levels because the whole thing in the beginning was to evolve life on Earth. And with mammals, you had animals that could go everywhere. True, the reptiles could, but the mammals could go further than the reptiles. Okay, India and Australia separated from Africa, and the southern Indian Ocean and the North Atlantic, just the north, formed. And the T5 Sea, which I showed before, was this waterway that ran between here, and it partially closed. Now, dinosaurs, to them the most important, they place a premium on size, armor, and weapons. And when to develop all those, they had to greatly change the original DNA code. Now, the great plant-eating dinosaurs, such as, this was Brontosaurus, and he weighed about 50 tons. And then there was the 87-foot-long Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus. I think this is Hadrosaurus. They call him Edmond something, but it's also, he's like Hadrosaurus. They had like a duck bill. And they were the dominant, they ruled the swamps in North America, Europe, North Africa, and Australia around 190 million years ago. Now, they started off, all of them started off as two-legged creatures, but they dropped down. Most of the plant eaters have a hump in their back too. They dropped down to 4 feet and they went backwards, and because they stood in the swamps all day long, stretching their necks to eat plant foliage. And you'll notice most of them have a long neck. But now, at the same time, plants were changing too. And conifers, such as pine, spruce, and firs, spread and increased in number around 190 million years ago. Now, these plants had a soft, splintery wood, and the dinosaurs left them alone. But now, dinosaurs had a small brain. The food supply was decreasing because of the conifers were spreading. The food supply was decreasing because they were the dinosaurs were increasing in number, and they were growing larger and larger and eating more and more forests. But they kept on growing, they just kept increasing. Now, the last terrestrial amphibians passed extinction because they couldn't compete with the dinosaurs for food. The dinosaurs just ate everything. Okay, and around this time, that's when the amphibians of newts, salamanders, and frogs appeared. Frogs appeared in Africa, and newts and salamanders appeared in France. Now, as the plants and foliage decreased, the smaller flesh-eating dinosaurs, meat-eating dinosaurs, began to attack the plant eaters. Now, the largest of the flesh eaters was about 33 feet long, and they always had these well-developed hind legs. Tyrannosaurus, here's another one down here. See, he has really well-developed hind legs. And they had these little short, their forearms were really short. They were almost useless. They look kind of foolish with those little bitty hands. Anyway, the meat eaters liked fast food. They used to just run after their prey, put their heads out and bite out some flesh. And then their descendants or other dinosaurs might come along and eat the rest of the animal. Now, Stegosaurus, that's this one here. The plant eaters started evolving weapons and armor to fight off these meat eaters. Now Stegosaurus, this one here, was a plant eater, but he was heavily armored. He was about 20 feet long, and he lived in North America, Europe, and Africa around 190 million years ago. Now listen to what this dinosaur could do. Now see all those plates sitting up there on the back of his, on his back, these large triangular horn-covered bony plates. They helped him control and modify his body temperature by positioning himself so that the plates faced the sun and absorbed heat from the sunlight. Stegosaurus warmed himself, and by standing so that the plates were not struck by the sunlight, he could avoid overheating. Now he had two pairs, I don't know if you can see this, two pairs of bony spikes on his tail, and he used those to fight with. The fore limbs were shorter than the hind limbs, and he had this hump in his back because he originally stood up straight, but he mutated and changed and became walked on all four legs. Now Stegosaurus had another nerve knot back here to control this tail with these spikes on it, and people thought he had two brains because the one in the back was bigger, but it wasn't really, it was just a nerve knot. It did control that. Now around 190 million years ago, flying reptiles first appeared. Now they too evolved from that thecodont reptile, the one that left from America and went over to the Soviet and then came down and formed the therapsids. So in other words, the thecodont was just giving off energy, all kinds of energy. Now pterosaurs were bipedal, meat-eating, flying reptiles. Now this is the best picture I have of one, and it's not really a good one. But there were other types of them. This is another type of flying reptile. He didn't live, he died out. But both of those, these are kind of like, this is getting more toward pteranodon, but these are kind of like flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, not quite. Pterosaurs were bipedal, they walked on 2 feet, and they ate meat. They had a long, slender beak. Their eyes were large, and sight, rather than smell, was their dominant sense. Now, the pterosaur's brain was large in comparison to the other reptiles, and the pattern was more like that of a bird than a reptile. Now, pterosaurs had 4 limbs, which they mutated or changed into wings. A membrane of skin attached to one elongated finger and extended back to the knee. You can't really see it, but it extended back to the knee. And this pterosaur could glide. He didn't have the movement that the other, that birds had, but he could soar and glide. And he hung, in order to rest, he hung from his hind legs, just like a bat. Now, between 20 and 160 million years ago, primitive egg-laying mammals were living from Africa all the way to China. They had just spread out. And pterosaurs fertilized the eggs of mammals, just like the trilobites and the octopus and all of those. They went and stole somebody else's eggs, their creative energy. So pterosaurs fertilized the eggs of mammals, and pterodactyls, that's this one, evolved around 160 million years ago. Now, the first pterodactyls were small. Some of them were no larger than sparrows, and they had slender, delicate teeth. The largest of them had a wingspan of about 2 feet. Now, they were also gliders, but they had a diamond-shaped rudder at the tip of their tail. Like pterosaurs, pterodactyls hung from their hind legs to rest, and they spread into Africa and portions of Europe. Now, the earth was warm and moist around 136 million years ago. Arctic and Antarctic surface water temperatures were at or above 50 degrees, and polar regions were warm enough to support the growth of forests. Conifers, trees, like pine-like trees, became even more widespread in the northern hemisphere, but ferns were still the dominant plants in eastern Asia and western North America, especially Texas, Kansas, Wyoming, Montana. These regions were swamps at that time, and that's where the dinosaurs